Hi, hello. I'm Shigeru Miyamoto from Nintendo.
We traveled to Japan to explore the cultural roots we find in so many video games. Today we're at Myoto-iwa, where two rocks represent Izunagi and Izunami, the gods of creation and life in Japanese mythology.
We couldn't think of a better place to start our journey. So join us as we explore Japanese culture and its relation to the games that we love.
Our first game is one that needs no introduction, Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Released in 1998, its graphics were cutting edge at the time, featuring a fully 3D rendered world to explore. All around us are buildings made of European-style brick and mortar. An old medieval cathedral is home to the Temple of Time. Within it, the legendary Sword in the Stone. While Link is no King Arthur, he does have to save a princess, and in a tale as old as time, restores peace to the Kingdom of Hyrule. It's easy to forget that it was designed by an all-Japanese team, by Japanese minds. What sorts of influences did they imprint upon the game?
The sword-swinging action in Ocarina of Time is incredibly satisfying. From the hits themselves to its boss's elaborate death scenes. However, at the outset of its design, the developers ran into a problem. All the previous Zelda games were made in 2D, which heavily simplified its combat. The new added dimension would bring about a reimagining of Hyrule's world, but also a new set of design challenges. Link could easily be surrounded from all directions, and this would lead to frustration, as being unfairly outnumbered had no obvious solutions. The developers would look to samurai films, specifically a genre known as chambara action. What they noticed was when the hero is outnumbered, his foes would never strike him together. They politely wait their turn to each be disposed of individually. The same principle is applied to Ocarina of Time, and without it, fights with multiple enemies would be unfair. Thus, though Link is a Western hero, he retains a tiny bit of that samurai one-against-all spirit. Throughout the world of Hyrule, mysterious hidden grottos hold secrets for the player to find. The real mystery, however, may come from the subtle structures which tend to mark them. All over Japan, rock circles are ancient monuments that are thousands of years old. No one knows who made them or why. They simply exist as an unsolvable question, just like the grottos themselves.
These date back to the Jomon period, a prehistoric era in Japan's distant past. The pottery of this period is very unique and almost alien, the perfect concept for a civilization long forgotten. In Breath of the Wild, these designs would serve as the basis for the ancient Sheikah culture, a fascinating blend between real history and art design. Moving past the Jomon period is the Kofun period, named after gigantic burial mounds. The size of the Kofun match their equally powerful leaders. Laid to rest with them are countless clay figures known as haniwa. They are believed to protect the dead, but also potentially serve as a replacement for human sacrifices. These are reminiscent of the game's most eerie enemy, re-deads. I can't help but feel a striking similarity in design, with their hollowed eyes and mouths, and being laid to rest within the graves of Hyrule's royal families.
While these comparisons are interesting, there may still be an even deeper connection within Ocarina of Time's design. To understand that, though, we need to talk about Japan's indigenous religion, practiced by the majority of the population still to this day. Like many cultures, Japan's history begins in its most primitive form, oral tradition. From this stemmed its unique religion, Shinto. Shinto means way of the gods. Its values and beliefs have been passed through the ages, from one storyteller to the next. Core to Shinto belief is what is known as kami, spiritual beings which inhabit the natural world around us. This not only includes living things like animals, but also natural elements. Large rocks, sturdy trees, and even flowing rivers are all home to these invisible but ever-present spirits. We've traveled to one of Japan's oldest shrines, Ise Jingu, to learn and understand more about its deep connection to Shinto. Ise is a shrine deep within the forest. Its remote and natural location is the perfect spot for one to connect with the natural world. Kami are divine beings, and to interact with them, any impurities must be cleansed. This way, harmony is maintained between the sacred and the human world. At the riverbank of the Isuzu River, you'll find many a person cleansing themselves. Here you wash away your impurities before approaching the gods. It used to be visitors would take a full body plunge. Nowadays, we simply purify the hands and mouth.
Water is an important part of Shinto tradition, as are all natural things. This seamless integration of nature and man seems to be present in Ocarina of Time as well. Deep within the forest are the eternally youthful children, known as the Kokiri. Their everlasting childhood is preserved under the guardianship of the Great Deku Tree, who protects the sacred woods from evil beyond.
At a small shrine near the river is a god known as Takimatsuri no Kami. This is what's known as a guardian kami. This one in particular was enshrined to protect the Isuzu River from floods.
Guardian kami, known as Mamori Kami in Japanese, provide protective spiritual powers to those around them.
Though invisible to the Western eye, hidden Shinto parallels exist within the script of Ocarina of Time.
In the forest, one Kokiri child gives unique insight into the Deku Tree's purpose, referring to him as the forest guardian of the Kokiri. In Japanese, this phrase is Mori no Mamori Kami, the guardian kami of the forest. Once the Deku Tree dies, the forest becomes infested with monsters. When Link cleanses the evil within the forest temple, a new tree sprouts up. This restores harmony and safety to the Kokiri, the exact purpose of a Mamori Kami. The Zoras are an aquatic race and one with the water. Their domain lies at the source of Hyrule's rivers, which they are responsible to protect. Jabu Jabu is the great fish which lives at the top of Zora's domain. The King Zora himself refers to him as a guardian god, but in the Japanese version, he's referred to as Momori Kami. We can see further reinforcement of this concept from one of the Zoras. In English, he says that Jabu Jabu is the patron deity of the Zoras. In Japanese, however, he refers to him as Zora no Kami, literally the kami of the Zoras. We can feel the echoes of Shinto practice through the Zora's worship of this great fish deity. Lastly are the rotund and hardy Gorons, friendly and outgoing. The Gorons themselves can be seen rolling around their home. Goro Goro is the Japanese sound of a tumbling rock, the origin of which their name comes from. There's no hard evidence on what Gorons may worship as their kami. However, there are a few interesting theories. Darunia is the leader of the Gorons, and the descendant of an ancient Goron hero. His son has an insightful piece of dialogue, referring to a statue within his room as Kamisama no Zo, or Statue of the Kami. Maybe the Gorons worship this hero as their protector. It may be, however, that the place the Gorons live, Death Mountain itself, is their protective kami. At the mountain's peak, Kapora Gabora tips a small hint to us, referring to Death Mountain in both English and Japanese as Sei Naruyama, or Sacred Mountain. The Gorons rely directly on the precious rocks within it to sustain their life, and are inseparable from the very mountain they seem to resemble. These three races live in perfect harmony with the world around them, and their designs not only reflect this visually, but their behaviors as well.
Now, as we approach the end of our journey here in Ise, we arrive at the most important shrine in all of Japan, that of Amaterasu, goddess of the sun. She is the central and most powerful deity of Shinto belief. So sacred is this spot that we can only film from the bottom of its steps. And as you can see, countless people come from all of Japan to pray at this divine location. Next, we'll be taking a look at one of the most famous Shinto stories in Japan, Amaterasu in the Cave, and how it influenced Zelda's derivative classic, a game by the name of Okami.
Amaterasu, goddess of the sun, the most important kami to the Japanese people. It's believed the imperial line, the emperors of Japan, are her sacred descendants. In the Shinto pantheon, intricate myths are woven about her and various other kami. However, none cause her more trouble than her impetuous brother, Susanoo. The story of Amaterasu in the cave starts with Susanoo's mischievous behavior. Being second to his more powerful sister fills him with jealousy, sending him into a rage. Amaterasu, filled with anger and grief, decides to hide herself within a cave. As darkness falls on the land, we are reminded that Amaterasu is the source of all light in both heavens and earth. The gods devise a plan to lure her out. One goddess disrobes herself during a dance performance, causing the other gods to erupt in laughter. This piqued Amaterasu's curiosity, and when she peered out, she saw herself in a mirror they had set up. Stunned by her own beauty, they seized her from the cave, and light was once again restored to the land. With such importance to Japanese culture, how would the team behind Okami choose to depict one of Japan's most revered goddesses? How about as a cute furry wolf? Okami is a clever pun. As a word, it means both wolf and great god. With that simple word, Clover Studio would create Amaterasu's most beloved portrayal in gaming. Okami combines myth with a fictional, ancient Japanese setting. It only takes one look to see its beautiful Japanese influence, from blossoming sakura trees to iconic real-life locations. Every object is rendered with a hand-painted touch. The thickness of lines are inconsistent, reminiscent of Japanese ink-wash paintings and calligraphy. Within this beautiful world lies the sequel to the story of Amaterasu in the cave. At the end of that tale, the reckless Susanoo is cast down to earth for the chaos he's caused to all the gods. His fall from the heavens results in him coming upon a distressed old couple. He learns that the eight-headed serpent Orochi wants their daughter as a sacrifice. He has 8 jars of sake made as a trap. When Orochi drinks from them, his intoxication leaves him vulnerable, and Susanoo removes his heads one by one. He marries the elderly couple's daughter and also makes amends with the gods, offering Amaterasu a gift, a powerful sword he found within Orochi's tail. Okami follows these events for the most part. However, there's just one problem. Susanoo is an incompetent, lazy, drunk idiot. He's far from the all-powerful god of storm. Whether it's sleeping when he comes across a difficult obstacle, or cowering in fear when he's faced with insurmountable odds, Susanoo is far from prepared to do this alone. In fact, anytime he's in a pickle, it's Amaterasu who hops in to save the day, using her magical celestial brush to cut down his foes. While this has great comedic effect, it also has a humanizing element. In the game's plot, he's not a god, but a human descendant of a great hero who sealed Orochi a generation ago. He lives in the shadow of this great man, a legend that he cannot live up to. Doubting that the tale of Orochi ever existed, he actually is the one who breaks the seal containing him, unleashing darkness and evil across Japan. However, this sets up Susanoo for redemption, because despite being incompetent, he does everything he can to undo his mistake. He keeps trying and never gives up, and as the plot plays out, you can't help but want to see him succeed. The climax of his story, he strikes down Orochi with his hand alone. This fulfills his heroic nature from the original tale, but also redeems him as a character. No longer the inept man he once was. This aligns with the purpose of the original myth, with Susanoo going from insolent and uncontrollable to much more civilized and well-behaved. Thus Susanoo, through trials and tribulations, comes to embody the great god which his character was based on. Now, Susanoo's story ends here, but the mythological references do not. In fact, Each weapon type in the game has special historical significance related to the myths we just told. The rosary is the jewel, which piqued Amaterasu's interest within the cave. The reflector is the mirror in which she saw herself, and the glaive is the sword which Susanoo obtains from Orochi's tail. These three artifacts are actually believed to exist to this day. They are known as Japan's imperial regalia. Nobody actually knows what these objects look like, except the imperial family themselves. Still, they live on in the imagination of the Japanese people, their stories carried on through okami itself.
Now, we've touched upon two famous Japanese legends, but to understand their cultural impact, we're going to look a bit deeper at a character known as Oki. His home is the bitterly snowy region of Kamui. The villagers here sport colorful, interesting masks, along with a unique ability to shapeshift into various animals. Their cultural basis draws from the Ainu people, Japan's indigenous population. One of their most important mythological heroes is a man named Oki Kurmi, the origin of which Oki gets his name. He's credited with teaching humans domestic skills such as how to make fire, and he is an important part of Ainu culture. However, it's his brilliant adaptation in okami that really teaches some interesting Japanese values. In the plot of the game, Kamui is fraught with ice caused by demons, who Oki intends to slay. He is a fearsome warrior, and he wields the sword Kutone. This sacred weapon resides in a stone in his village, and is said to ward off evil. Against the wishes of his kinsmen, he takes it for himself. His goal is to fulfill a prophecy, which states that the weapon's true power will only be revealed when it glows silver. At a first glance, this story is similar to the Legend of Zelda, and seems to echo the same ideas. A hero takes the sword from the stone, slays the bad guys, and saves the day. However, this narrative is turned on its head in a very Japanese way. Oki believes that to unleash Kutone's true power, he must slay as many demons as he can. However, no matter how many monsters he defeats, the prophecy is never fulfilled. This leaves him stricken with frustration and anger. However, the truth is revealed to him in a decisive moment. He gets his perfect chance to finish off the demons terrorizing his village, but instead, he chooses to save Amaterasu's life. Once he does this, Kutone finally shines silver. Oki comes to the realization that his single-minded, selfish desire for power prevented the sword from gaining its true strength. With this new discovery, Amaterasu and Oki team up, slay the demons, and harmony is restored to the land of Kamui. This is a complete reversal of the Legend of Zelda. Oki is not the hero of time. In fact, it's this individualistic thinking that prevents him from saving his village. Only by working together can we achieve our goals. Japan is a collectivist society, where the good of the whole outweighs the individual. Gods are not above this either. Amaterasu hiding in the cave deprives the entire world from her precious light. Despite Susanoo provoking her, it is a selfish reaction, because it unfairly affects those around her. Japan is also a collaborative society. When the gods have to lure Amaterasu out of the cave, one group mines ore and smelts it to make a mirror. Another uproots a tree and hangs the mirror from it. All of the gods work together, laughing and dancing to tempt Amaterasu out. This idea isn't just limited to stories within games, but how they are made as well. It's easy to use Zelda as an example of a more westernized story, but when you look at Ocarina of Time's design itself, it tells a completely different tale. Though Shigeru Miyamoto would be the supervisor to the game's creation, the game itself was made by 5 different collaborating directors, a method unique to its time and remains that way to this day. One of the most legendary games ever released may never have come to life without this ancient instilled value, with origins as far back as Amaterasu in the cave. We've touched on the Shinto principles which help unite Japan culturally, but just as important is its history with Buddhism. Buddhism took a long, arduous course to reach Japan. Starting with its humble origins in India, it then moved to China, where it was changed and reformed, then transmitted through the Korean peninsula. By the time it had arrived in Japan, it had matured for over 1,000 years. The beginning of the Asuka period, 538, denotes the arrival of Buddhism to Japan. Its significance cannot be understated. By 710, Japan had gone from a disorganized group of warring clans to having a stable capital and a powerful central government. To learn more about the history of Buddhism, we traveled to Nara, the capital of Japan during the peak of its Buddhist influence. Though less than an hour from Osaka and Kyoto, Nara feels far removed from Japan's bigger cities. In autumn, the natural beauty of Japan really shows its colors. One of Nara's main attractions is its open deer park. It's a place where humans and nature can freely mingle in harmony. In Nara, the deer blend seamlessly with the people around them. You can feed them and even pet them.
Now, deer are abundant here. In fact, you can see them everywhere. One interesting fact about this is that the overpopulation of deer is in a large part caused by the extinction of the wolf in Japan.
The wolf has been extinct for over 100 years, and it has caused a lot of damage due to the overpopulation of the deer. The wolf is their natural predator, and without them, the deer can breed freely. In 2019, the damage to agriculture and the environment caused by deer was over 5.3 billion yen, or 34 million US dollars. In the Breath of the Wild, a small side quest may be a gentle reference to this issue. A farmer asks us to hunt some deer as they are overpopulating the nearby forest and damaging it. While seemingly innocuous, it's interesting to know how much trouble these furry little creatures can really cause. However, they are pretty cute, and I can see why the problem may have gotten a bit out of hand. Though Buddhist symbols can be seen all around Japan today, it's easy to forget that its adoption had to be fought for. There was fierce fighting between the staunch Shinto believers and those who would adopt the new Buddhist ideas. The main Buddhist supporter was known as the Soga clan. They crushed their rivals and firmly entrenched Buddhism in Japanese culture. As time passed, the rivalry between Shintoism and Buddhism would dissipate, and both have come to be embraced in modern Japanese society. However, one thing remains true. The era in which Japan adopted Buddhism coincided with its government gaining immense power.
Hundreds of years later, Japan would use this power to create one of the largest wooden structures ever, Todaiji Temple. Let's take a look inside.
Todaiji Temple was commissioned by Emperor Shomu as a beacon of peace and to protect his people from conflict and calamity. The timing was no coincidence. During the previous 2 decades of Emperor Shomu's reign, the country had faced widespread crop failures and an epidemic. Add on to that, growing homelessness and starving people crowded the streets of the capital city. The belief at the time was that the great Buddha would lead the country out of adversity. At its time, this gigantic bronze Buddha statue within Todaiji was the largest in the world. Buddhist monks would come from all across Asia to see this massive marvel, which is just as impressive today as it once was. His nostrils are a massive 37 centimeters across. To give you some perspective, here's a watermelon for scale. One of the most fascinating things about traditional Japanese structures is their lack of screws or nails. Kagumi is a type of building technique that fits wood together to create strong joints. This gives flexibility to help against things like earthquakes. Of course, with this temple being entirely made out of wood, it's extremely vulnerable to fires, burning down and being rebuilt to its former glory 3 times.
We've touched on the importance of Buddhist history in Japan, but we haven't yet learned what it's really all about. No game better teaches us about Japanese Buddhism than the obscure point-and-click title known as Cosmology of Kyoto. Released in 1993, the game begins by sending us to the distant past, to the ancient capital of Kyoto. Throughout the exploration of this eerie world, we explore the supernatural tales of a city steeped in folklore. Rather than there being any ultimate goal, it's a nonlinear game where experiences unfold as we play through it. The era the game is set in is known as the Heian period. It is considered by many to be the pinnacle of classical Japan's art, literature, and beauty. However, it was also an age of intense political turmoil and destruction. Within this civil strife bred new fears, and those fears developed into a rich culture of superstition and myth. In the game, many of these ghostly stories come from the Konjaku Monogatari, a collection of tales with Buddhist origins. An entire video could be dedicated to these. The game itself has a large reference book which details the history and origin behind them as well. Many are even based on real-world locations, where the encounters actually took place. The game kicks off with a rather notable one, Rajomon Gate, the main entrance of ancient Kyoto. Here, a famous samurai, Watanabe no Tsuna, has a fierce battle with a demon, injuring him and becoming immortalized at the location. This spot is full of myths and legends which the game details further. But perhaps its most well-known appearance is the Kurosawa film Rashomon, where the dilapidated gate sets the stage for its mysterious story. With our curiosity piqued, we set out to find what remains of this renowned gate in Kyoto. What we found was quite surprising. Off the main street, a small playground has the remnants of all that's left of this historical location. A mere pillar stands, marking what was once Kyoto's bustling city entrance. Cosmology of Kyoto roots itself in real life, not just geographically, but in its serious depiction of the era it was based off of. As we walk the dilapidated streets of Kyoto, the anguish portrayed is unsettling. The poor and unfortunate are everywhere. They are tired, dirty, and their mangled faces express their troubles. Crime is rampant. At every corner is a bandit who would gladly rob us of our money. It's not a human, then a giant demon will tear us to shreds instead. The world of Cosmology of Kyoto is one of suffering and loss, of the impermanence of everything. It is a bleak portrayal of life, but one deeply rooted in Buddhist ideas. The origin of all Buddhist thought comes from a man known as Siddhartha Gautama, or who most of us simply know of as the Buddha. According to him, desire is the root of all human suffering. Everything we have, we will lose someday. Our families, our possessions, our youth, and our health. When we understand this, the game's visual style really starts to make sense. The ugly, misshapen people emphasize their age and their struggles. Death is at every corner and serves as a constant reminder of our eventual fate. At one point, we save a young, beautiful woman who has been robbed by bandits. It feels like a real victory, like we found some light in the darkness. As we know though, youth and beauty never lasts long. It's only a few scenes later where she's promptly killed by a demon. One encounter emphasizes these points quite well, but it requires a bit of context to understand. A man named Haseo is an expert at Sugoroku, a popular gambling game from the Heian period. He plays a demon in a high-stakes match. If he loses, the demon will take his fortune. However, he ends up winning. So the demon creates for him a beautiful woman as a reward. There's just one caveat though. He cannot touch her for 100 days. Overwhelmed by his lust, he touches her on day 80, and she disintegrates before him. Again, we have the theme of impermanent beauty, but also Haseo's uncontrollable desire. Desire leads us to suffering, and it's what brought about Haseo's misfortune. Many encounters in the game serve as historical or superstitious curiosities, but as we can see, some of them have the element of a Buddhist parable. Now, Buddhism played a prominent role in the Heian period, but equally as important was the practice of divination and magic. Throughout the game, we encounter various events where we run into the ghost hunting specialists at the time, known as Onmyoji. We use their help throughout the game with things like exorcising ghosts. Their powers also extend to being able to control demons themselves. One interesting way they may have influenced history is within the design of Kyoto itself. You may know a bit about the concept feng shui, the idea that the way objects are arranged, such as in your room, can influence energy flow and bring good fortune. This idea exists on a much larger scale within the very fabric of Kyoto's city architecture. At the start of the game, an elaborate animation plays where 4 different animals appear, flanking each side of the city. It's as if Kyoto exists within their domain, and that might not actually be far from the truth. These are the 4 holy beasts, auspicious symbols Kyoto was built to align with, granting its citizens their protective benefits.
Right now, we're at the Kamo River, which runs to the east of Kyoto. A river running to the east represents the Azure Dragon, which brings growth and prosperity to those that live within the city.
This underlying harmonious organization influenced Kyoto's building placement as well. To each side of the city, a prominent temple was erected, Saiji to the west and Toji to the east, providing each side of the capital their protection. Toji is all that stands to this day. While playing, you may glance over the pagoda within the temple grounds. However, in real life, it's hard to miss it. In fact, it's the largest pagoda in Japan, standing at a staggering 55 meters tall. At the center of the temple grounds is its main hall. Within it are marvelous, gigantic Buddha statues. Though we're not allowed to film them, Cosmology of Kyoto gives us a unique glimpse to what the monks of the day may have practiced within. Important to Buddhist belief is the cycle of life, death, and being reborn eternally. This is dictated by karma, the idea that our actions create consequences in our now and future lives. In the game, for example, we can use our money to buy food and medicine, which we can then give to the poor, giving us good karma. Alternatively, we can kill a fat, greedy moneylender and blow all of her money gambling on chicken fighting. While it's fun, it's probably going to give us some bad karma. When we inevitably die to one of the countless threats in the game, we were reborn in accordance with our choices. One possible option is being born as an Asura. They are beings just below humans on the karmic scale, and are depicted as being overcome with anger and jealousy. They wage feudal wars with those in the heavens above, ultimately facing constant defeat. Worse than that, though, is being reborn as an animal. Animals are at the behest of humans, predators, and even their own kind. At any moment, their life can be taken from them. They live each day in constant fear and survival, never knowing true peace. The worst of all, however, is being reborn in hell. For a game released in the early 90s, it has some of the most unsettling depictions of what a life of damnation looks like. And we're not even scratching the page-long descriptions of dozens of different hells within these hells that exist. Now, if you manage to avoid all of these, you may be on the path to gaining some good karma, and with that comes reward. You can be reborn into the highest realm of existence, known as the heavenly beings. Their paradise is full of bliss, happiness, and beauty. The air is filled with the sounds of divine music and the fragrance of heavenly flowers. But as we know, all good things must come to an end. Suddenly, these beings grow old, and their garlands wilt. Those around them abandon them, and they are left to die alone. It almost feels like, no matter what we do, we just can't catch a break. We simply cannot avoid the suffering which life brings us. There is a solution, however, and it takes its own unique form in Japan. In fact, it is the most popular form of Buddhism there today, known as Pure Land Buddhism. One of its founders is a humble man we can meet within the game. His name is Kuya, and in just 5 simple syllables, he would change Japan forever.
Namu Amida Butsu. Namu Amida Butsu.
Namu Amida Butsu means, I take refuge in Amida. It is a sort of prayer which, if repeated, will call upon Amida. Think of him as a sort of divine Buddhist protector. In his life, Amida made a vow to help anyone who would call upon him. By repeating this prayer, he promised to save your soul from eternal suffering. At death, you will be reborn in the eternal paradise, known as the Pure Land. It is a peaceful place where you can practice Buddhist teachings until you reach enlightenment, a state of being where you transcend being reborn and attain true freedom from all suffering. If you're thinking this sounds somewhat like a Japanese Jesus, you wouldn't be the first person to make that comparison. While we do never see this sacred place with our own eyes in the game, it does end with us chanting the prayer with Kuya himself. It leaves us with an interesting question. By typing this prayer within the game, have we guaranteed our own personal rebirth in the Pure Land? Now, we've learned that core to Buddhist thought is the idea of death and rebirth, and are moving up and down the hierarchy of existence. However, this begs one interesting question. What if you couldn't die? For our next game, we'll be taking to the remote mountains of Osaka to learn more about a modern classic deeply rooted in Buddhism.
Sekiro is a game with close ties to Buddhism, and to understand it better, we've decided to take to Japan's rural mountains.
We're on a pilgrimage, one that's been undertaken on this mountain for over 1,000 years. We're going to a very special Buddhist temple to experience part of Japan's rich religious history. Over 70% of Japan consists of forested mountains, so it's no wonder that even before Buddhism came to this island nation, mountains were seen as sacred places where kami of all forms reside.
These places, high and closest to the heavens, were places where magical powers could be obtained. Once the Buddha came to inhabit the island, his followers naturally came to these sacred mountaintops and began establishing Buddhist temples. It's within this natural backdrop that Sekiro's setting takes place, in the fictional land of Ashina. The Ashina clan is slowly losing power in an ongoing war. Much like the real-life counterparts, this land is blessed with hidden powers. Through it flows rivers full of what's known as the rejuvenating waters. This is their desperate weapon to win the war. Those who consume it gain incredible strength, but not without a cost. Their eyes glow red, and they slowly lose their minds. They become depraved and inhuman, consumed by their desires. This is the world that Sekiro portrays, a bleak one, where desire corrupts the very minds of the people within it. Corrupted Buddhist world, however, may have more of a historical basis than you might think. During the 12th century, natural disasters, wars, and political instability had caused great social unrest in Japan. An influential monk named Honen concluded that Japan was in a late cycle of Buddhist law. What this meant is that Buddhist truth had been diluted, and the teachings had become lost due to time and the errors of humans. It poses a real crisis, however. Why pray to a Buddhist statue or follow Buddhist principles if they can't help you achieve enlightenment? The term for this era is Mappo, roughly translated as end times.
With the unreliability of Buddhist teachings, many began to turn to newer, more effective means of spiritual guidance. Some would turn to different forms of Buddhism, while others would turn to the mountains.
Shugindo is a very syncretic religious sect, taking concepts from Shinto, Buddhism, and Taoism. Practitioners are known as Yamabushi, literally mountain prostrators. They perform rituals in the mountain, depriving themselves of food and reciting Buddhist sutras in the cold water. It is said that through these rites, they absorb the power of the mountains into their bodies, granting them supernatural abilities.
Back in the day, a trek up this mountain was a lone and isolated journey, posing a serious threat to travelers. Altars like these line the mountain, a welcome spot for travelers to rest and pray for a safe climb.
There are still as many as 6,000 Yamabushi practicing some form of Shugindo in Japan today, though most live double lives back down in civilization.
During the time of Mappo, the Yamabushi led many high-profile nobles of the court to Shugindo temples deep within the mountains. Here we are at the final stop of our pilgrimage.
Todaiji Temple, a remote Buddhist sanctuary at the top of Mount Kongo. Sound familiar? Mount Kongo is the geographical basis for Senpou Temple, from the stunning view far above its surroundings to the beautiful autumn foliage. At this time of year, there's no better comparison. With the matching colors of the trees, the real-life influence is impossible to miss. The developers even put a small nod to the Yamabushi in this area. One of the Buddhist idols is named Shugendo, which is appropriately nestled on a steep mountainside. As you scale it on your next playthrough, maybe you can harness some of your inner Yamabushi. Now, while beautiful, the backdrop of the fading trees isn't just for show. It may actually reflect the minds of the monks themselves. In fact, they have become corrupted, experimenting on humans in the pursuit of immortality. To better understand the creative genius of this area, we need to turn to the real-world origin that these monks are based on. A sect peculiar to Japan known as Shingon Buddhism. Shingon Buddhism is a form of esoteric Buddhism, which emphasizes achieving enlightenment through means beyond just spoken words. They accomplish this with 3 different core concepts: mantras, mandalas, and mudras. Shingon is the Japanese word for mantra. Mantras are phrases imbued with the power of the Buddhas. Simply by uttering them, they can transform your mind, freeing you of ignorance, negative thoughts, even helping you embody positive virtues. Though they have distorted minds, the Senpou monks eerily mumble mantras to themselves, as if they are clinging on to the old beliefs they once practiced. Next, let's talk about mudras. Mudras are hand positions that symbolize different virtues. For example, the palm out, hand down is known as the Virata mudra and symbolizes compassion. It's said that some Buddhist truths are so deep and complex that they can't be expressed through words alone. The Senpou monks create special candies which impart spiritual power to those who eat them. By biting down on the candy and performing a mudra, we can receive various buffs to our character. A fun way to combine fact, fiction, and interesting lore all in one. Lastly, we have mandalas. Mandalas are incredibly complex pictures that represent the universe, the structure of reality, and the path to enlightenment all in one. If that sounds overwhelming, that's sort of the point. The image's totality is designed to be meditated upon, giving benefits such as improving focus and relaxing the mind. With a keen eye, we can find 2 mandalas tucked away in the temple's recesses. They are, of course, in disrepair, just like the temple itself. One of the more startling aspects of Shingon Buddhism is known as Sokushin Butsu. This is a form of self-mummification, where a practitioner starves themselves until death while ingesting various things to preserve their body. Again, Sekiro blends real culture with a creative twist. Mummified monks appear throughout the area, but are kept alive by giant centipedes, which they've bound with to grant them immortal life. It really shows just how far these monks have strayed from the true Buddhist path. While self-mummification is quite a morbid topic, it has its place in more popular culture too. In Breath of the Wild, the map is filled with Sheikah shrines for us to explore. The Sheikah monks within them bear a striking resemblance. It may be that these mummies have the same origin in Sokushin Butsu, just like those in Sekiro, though thankfully with a less shocking presentation. As we can see, Senpou Temple is full of references to Japanese culture. However, we've saved the best for last. At its highest point is a magnificent wooden stage, and it's to this real-life location that we'll be taking you next.
Kiyomizu-dera is one of the most famous Buddhist temples in Japan, and a national treasure. Its most visually striking feature is the stage before us now.
The main stage is 4 stories tall and constructed using 400-year-old tree trunks. There's an expression in Japanese that roughly translates to jump off the stage of Kiyomizu, similar to the Western expression to take a leap of faith.
If If you're not in the mood for a lengthy fall, though, try instead enjoying the beautiful view. It's just as stunning in real life as it is in the game, though a bit less mountainous. Towards center stage, an offering of incense can be burned. Incense is believed to purify the space and mind, creating an environment conducive to meditation and prayer. It is also an offering, showing respect and devotion to the Buddha.
The inner sanctuary is the most sacred part of the temple. No photography is allowed. Inside is a statue of Kannon, goddess of compassion. Her 11 heads and 1,000 arms symbolize her endless empathy and her ability to ease the suffering of those who pray to her.
While we can't show it in real life, we can take a peek within the inner hall in Sekiro. Here, we find countless statues of Kannon. However, the origins of this room lie within another location, known as Sanju Sangendo. This famous hall is full of 1001 golden statues of Kannon. It's quite well known, and you may even find references to it in other forms of Japanese media. The principal statue of this temple is the seated 1,000-armed Kannon, also present in Sekiro. Each hand holds a different sacred instrument, all to aid her noble quest to help others. One famous Buddhist tale about Kannon is known as the Straw Millionaire. It's a story about a poor, suffering man who prays to Kannon to help him escape from poverty. She tells him to take the first thing he touches and go west. This ends up being a simple piece of straw, but with it, he will find great fortune. As he goes along, he makes various exchanges with people he meets. He trades the straw for some oranges, which he then trades for cloth. He trades the cloth for a horse, and the horse for a house. Thus, from only a simple piece of straw, Kannon leads him from rags to riches. The Zelda series would end up taking direct inspiration from this tale, with a keen focus on the trading aspect. Its first iteration appeared in Link's Awakening, where we can obtain a Yoshi doll, which begins the long chain of trades with various characters. The trades are pretty straightforward and align well with the Kannon version, giving miscellaneous objects to those who need them. Connecting these invisible dots between the characters gives the sense as if fate is weaving us all together. It all culminates in Link getting the magnifying glass, which we need to beat the game, and one of the most powerful weapons, the boomerang. The quest must have been well received, as the developers would end up putting a similar one in Ocarina of Time. We start out by getting a mere Kuko egg, and slowly trade it for various things as we progress. However, an ethical question does pop up as we go along. One of the characters is a gigantic Goron who has been blinded and needs eye drops. The ingredient to make this, however, is a tiny innocent frog. If we go through with it, this does get us the strongest weapon in the game, but I can't help but feel Kannon frown upon our actions, even if just a little bit.
To the back of the shrine is a small statue of Kannon. Kannon herself is closely symbolically linked to water. By pouring it over this small statue of her, we can wash away our impurities and sins. Just as water can take any shape, Kannon's compassion is thought to flow freely to help out all sentient beings.
The water at this temple, however, isn't just any. Kiyomizu actually means pure water, named after the sacred Otowa waterfall, which it was built upon. Japanese people come from all over the country to drink from it, receiving its various blessings. Water is not only closely related to Kannon, but also to dragons, which you can see all around the temple. They are capable of controlling rain, rivers, and even the ocean. The connection between water and dragons originated in China, which was then inherited by Japan, entrenching themselves in their culture. Rather than being destructive creatures like in Western tradition, they hold protective power and grant it to those who honor them.
In 1629, this pagoda burnt down due to a fire. When the craftsmen rebuilt it, they added this small dragon to the corner. There hasn't been a fire in over 400 years, so the dragon seems to be doing his job pretty well.
A famous Chinese legend gives insight to one of Japan's most popular gaming series. It states that if a carp swims up a waterfall with all its might, it may jump over it, becoming a mighty dragon. It's a tale of perseverance, and it's also the basis of the Pokemon Magikarp.
All right, Magikarp, let's escape!
Though a player may be frustrated at first to get this seemingly useless fish, have faith, and it will eventually turn into the fearsome dragon, Gyarados. Though easy to overlook, Ocarina of Time's Water Temple has a subtle dragon motif. The hookshot statues are shaped like dragon heads. In one of the rooms, a whirlpool adds an obstacle to our passage. Beneath the water is a coiling dragon. It's as if the legendary beast is the one controlling the water himself. The 3DS remake plays even further into these themes. 2 black dragons were added to the battle before Dark Link. And in the boss room, dragon designs are all over the walls. These small examples give way to deeper insights within Japanese culture.
It's quite a rainy day here in Kiyomizu-dera. It's rather overcast. It seems that the dragons are smiling favorably on Japan, giving it a bountiful harvest. We've explored the origins of Kiyomizu-dera's purifying waters. Now let's turn one last time to Sekiro to uncover the mystery of Ashina's corruption.
As we push through falling autumn leaves, we arrive at the final area of Sekiro, the Fountainhead Palace. We're immediately greeted with an amazing view and countless sakura trees in full blossom. This slice of paradise is a perpetual spring. It's as if we've entered the very gates of heaven itself. However, much like the history it's based off of, looks can be deceiving. To understand this area more, we need to touch back upon the Heian period. Through Cosmology of Kyoto, we saw a depiction of this era from the lowest point, the poor and unfortunate. In stark contrast to this, however, was the incredibly rich Japanese upper class. As Japan descended into chaos, a small circle of royal families controlled the majority of the nation's wealth. They created a pocket of ignorance and bliss and lived extravagant yet sheltered lives. But they also gave way to an immense cultural growth within Japan, which helped shape national identity up to the modern day. The picture painted by the Fountainhead Palace, however, is a rather bleak one. The palace nobles are unsettling, with hollowed eyes and elongated fingers. It looks as if their minds have decayed from simple pleasures. Even their own animals share the same distorted features of their masters. Throughout the palace, we can see the female bodyguards of the nobles, known as okami warriors. The naginata, the polearm which they wield, is of particular interest. Due to its ease of use and long range, it was historically popular for women's self-defense, and throughout Japanese media, you can often see women using them. Now, with all the free time in the world, nobles would need various ways to keep themselves occupied. Playing music was a popular pastime, but also things like dancing or writing poetry would be important skills in order to assimilate within the court culture. One ancient form of entertainment is known as kemari. The goal is simple: keep the ball from touching the ground for as long as you can. It can even be played with other people, as a way to bond with your fellow noblemen. Now, before we continue, we need to talk about that. The palace's biggest denizen is hard to miss, but with him comes an interesting side quest, which unsurprisingly echoes some Buddhist principles. A man we find, if you can even call him that, is infatuated with feeding this absolute unit of a fish. His daughter explains that he's been tricked into doing this, and it's implied that it's been going on for a very, very long time. We can get some poisonous bait and choose to kill the fish. The man is initially pretty distraught about this, but when he's given proof it's dead, he's ultimately grateful that he no longer has to take care of it. His desire to feed the carp was all that was keeping him alive, and being freed from it allows him to die peacefully. Now, it may have caught your eye that the carp looks, well, like a person. There's strong implications in the game that the palace nobles are actually slowly turning into carp. With the biggest one now gone, it leaves way for others to try to take its place. While we did save one individual by killing it, we've also just perpetuated the endless cycle of human existence, the unending struggle to be the biggest fish. As we push past the palace, we finally make our way to the last area, to the origin of Ashina's corruption. If you've been paying attention to this point, it probably won't surprise you. That's right, it's a divine water dragon. From within it, the rejuvenating waters flow, the source of all evil within Ashina. Besides being an incredibly epic fight, the mysterious lore that surrounds this sacred beast remains unsolved to this very day. Where does it come from, and why? The vague answer within the game says that the dragon's origins come from the West, for reasons ultimately unknown to us. Many people try to interpret the West literally. However, this may be off the mark. In Pure Land Buddhism, the West has special significance. It is the origin of the Pure Land, and many references to it exist within Buddhist stories. Like in The Straw Millionaire, when Kanon tells the man to take a piece of straw and head west. This is one potential answer, but we still don't know why the dragon came to Ashina in the first place. And it's to our last location that we now take you to solve this ultimate mystery within Sekiro's story.
This sacred garden is over 1,000 years old. Built in 794, it was once vast and beautiful, but it is now a much more modest shrine. It is in fact the oldest garden in Kyoto, Shinsenin.
Shinsenin has a rich historical background. It's the birthplace of Gion Festival, one of Japan's most ancient celebrations. It's been held annually for 1,000 years to protect against Japan's many natural disasters. Small wooden plaques called ema are hung near the shrine's entrance. Visitors write their wishes and prayers upon them, hanging them up for the gods to see. Their colorful illustrations reflect the shrine they are from, telling interesting stories that happen there as well. The woman depicted upon this one is Shizuka Gozen, one of the most famous women in Japanese history. It is said that as she danced in this very garden, the famous hero Yoshitsune fell in love with her and made her his mistress. However, the real reason we are here is because of the pond itself. Within it comes an ancient legend. Japan was suffering heavy droughts, and in 824, a monk named Kukai would have a solution. For 7 days, he held a rain-making ritual at this very location.
It's said that he summoned the great water dragon Zenyo to live in this pond, coming far from the west. In fact, the main shrine at Shinsenin is dedicated to this great dragon. They are believed to live within this pond to this very day.
A dragon coming from the west? Does that sound familiar? But it gets even more interesting. Kukai isn't just any Buddhist monk. He's actually the founder of Shingon Buddhism. If you recall, Shingon monks are what Senpou Temple monks are based off of. In the game, we learn that the Senpou monks are devising a plan to send the divine dragon back to its home in the west. Through a series of side quests, we can follow that plan. It gets us the best ending in the game, where we set out to return the dragon to where it rightfully belongs. It's almost as if the Senpou monks are returning the dragon which Kukai had brought with his rain-making ritual. While I'm not suggesting Kukai literally exists within Sekiro's world, there still remains a lingering question. Is the sacred dragon within this pond the true origin for Sekiro's story?
Now, I don't think I'm crazy when I say this seems to be a bit more than a coincidence. While it is just a theory, it's a fascinating one at that. All that being said, there's only one last thing to do: pay our respects to the dragon itself.